On January 11, 2002, with the authorization of U.S. President George W. Bush, the Guantanamo Bay detention camp opened. The camp, located within the Guantanamo Bay naval base in Cuba, on the coast of Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, was first established after the attacks of September 11, 2001, and in coordination with the War on Terror. uh, this camp would house up to 731 detainees at one point. At the time of its establishment, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld said the detention camp was established to detain extraordinarily dangerous people, to interrogate detainees in an optimal setting, and to prosecute detainees for war crimes. The Department of Defense at first kept this facility secret, and the identity of the individuals held in Guantanamo Bay also secret. But after losing attempts to defy a Freedom of Information Act request from the Associated Press, the U.S. military officially acknowledged holding 779 prisoners in the camp. The facility is operated by the Joint Task Force Guantanamo of the Southern Command of the Department of Defense in Guantanamo Bay Naval Base. Detention areas consist of Camp Delta, including Camp Echo, Camp Iguana, and Camp X-Ray. Camp X-Ray closed. After Bush political appointees at the U.S. Office of Legal Counsel, Department of Justice advised the Bush administration that the Guantanamo Bay detention camp could be considered outside of U.S. legal jurisdiction. Military guards took the first 20 detainees to Camp X-Ray on January 11, 2002. The Bush administration asserted that detainees were not entitled to any of the protections of the Geneva Conventions, while also claiming it was treating all detainees consistently with the principles of the Geneva Convention. Ensuring U.S. Supreme Court decisions since 2004 have determined otherwise, that U.S. courts do have jurisdiction. It ruled in Hamdan versus Rumsfeld on June 29, 2006, that detainees were entitled to the minimal protections listed on the Common Article 3 of the Geneva Conventions. Following this, on July 7, 2006, the Department of Defense issued an internal memo stating that detainees would, in the future, be entitled to protection under Common Article 3. But that was just the beginning of the problems for the detainees there. The CIA was called in to enhance techniques to coerce confessions and intelligence from their captives. Enhanced interrogation techniques is a euphemism for the program of systematic torture of detainees by the Central Intelligence Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and various components of the U.S. Armed Forces at remote sites around the world, including Bagram, Guantanamo Bay, and Abu Ghraib, authorized by officials of the George W. Bush administration. Methods used including beating, binding, and contorted stress positions, hooding, subjected to deafening noise, sleep disruption, sleep deprivation to the point of hallucination, deprivation of food, drink, medical care, as well as waterboarding, walling, sexual humiliation, subjection to extreme heat or extreme cold, and confinement in small coffin-like boxes. A Guantanamo inmate's drawing of some of these tortures, to which he himself was subjected, were published in the New York Times. That inmate would be Abu Zubaydah. Some of these techniques fall under the category known as white torture, which is basically a type of psychological torture technique aimed at complete sensory deprivation and isolation. Several detainees endured medically unnecessary rectal rehydration, which is an enema known as a clister, an injection of fluid into the lower bowel by way of the rectum. In addition to brutalizing detainees, there were threats to their families, such as threats to harm children and threats to sexually abuse or to cut the throats of detainees' mothers. The number of detainees subjected to these methods have never been authoritatively established, nor how many had died as a result of the interrogation regime, though the number could be as high as 100. The CIA has admitted to waterboarding 3 people implicated in the September 11th attacks: Abu Zubaydah, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and Mohammed al-Qahtani. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was waterboarded an unbelievable amount of 183 times. A Senate Intelligence Committee found photos of a waterboard surrounded by buckets of water at the Salt prison, where the CIA had claimed that waterboarding was never used. Former guards and inmates at Guantanamo have said that deaths which the U.S. military called suicides at the time were in fact homicides under torture. No murder charges have been brought for these 3 or for acknowledged torture-related homicides at Abu Ghraib or at Bagram. American and European officials, including former CIA Director Leon Panetta and former CIA officers, a Guantanamo prosecutor, and a military tribunal judge, have called enhanced interrogation a euphemism for torture. In 2009, both President Barack Obama and Attorney General Eric Holder said that certain techniques amount to torture and repudiated their use. They declined to prosecute either the CIA, U.S. Department of Defense, or the Bush administration officials who authorized the program, while leaving open the possibility of convening an investigatory truth commission, for which President Obama once called further accounting. January 22nd, 2009, President Obama issued a request to suspend proceedings at Guantanamo Military Commission for 120 days and to shut down the detention facility that year. However, on January 29, 2009, a military judge at Guantanamo rejected the White House request in the case of Abid al-Raham al-Nashri, creating an unexpected challenge for the administration as it reviewed how the U.S. Department brings Guantanamo detainees to trial. On May 20th, 2009, the United States Senate passed an amendment to the Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2009 by a vote of 90-6 to block funds needed for the transfer or release of prisoners held at Guantanamo Bay. In 2010, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, a former aide to Secretary of State Colin Powell, stated in an affidavit that top U.S. officials, including George Bush, Dick Cheney, and Donald Rumsfeld, had known that the majority of the detainees initially sent to Guantanamo were innocent, but that the detainees had been kept there for reasons of political expedience. Wilkerson's statement was submitted in connection with a lawsuit filed in federal district court by former detainee Adel Hassan Hamad against the United States government, several individuals, and officials. This supported numerous claims made by former detainees like Mozam Beg, a British citizen who had been held for 3 years in detention camps in Afghanistan and Guantanamo as an enemy combatant, under the claim that he was an al-Qaeda member who recruited for and provided money for al-Qaeda training camps and himself trained to fight U.S. or allied troops. All claims and charges were false. The CIA would later admit in 2011 that Abu Zubaydah, the alleged number 3 in al-Qaeda, was not important. He is currently the only Guantanamo prisoner held without charge. A 2013 Institute on Medicine as a Profession report concluded that health professionals working with the military and intelligence services designed and participated in cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment and torture detainees. Medical professionals were ordered to ignore ethical standards during involvement in abusive interrogation, including monitoring of vital signs under stress-inducing procedures. They used medical information for interrogation purposes and participated in force-feeding of hunger strikes in violation of World Medical Association, American Medical Association prohibitions. The SERE program, which was authored by James Mitchell, was later condemned, although many within the United States Department of Defense and Department of State continued to defend James Mitchell and Bruce Jessen. The SERE program was enhanced interrogation, which came from Air Force Survival Evasion Resistance Escape, codenamed SERE. The CIA contracted these two psychologists to develop alternative harsh interrogation techniques. Some of them forced confessions that weren't even true. In regards to numerous detainees, some claimed to be Al Qaeda, and some with their alleged involvement in the September 11, 2001 attacks, including Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ramzi bin al-Shibh, Abdul Aziz Ali, Mustafa al-Hasnawi, Muhammad al-Qahtani, and, like I said before, Abu Zubaydah. The psychologists relied heavily on experiments done by American psychologist Martin Seligman in the 1970s on learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is a behavior exhibited by a subject after enduring repeated aversive stimuli beyond their control. In these experiments, caged dogs were exposed to severe electric shocks in a random way in order to completely break their will to resist. Mitchell and Jessen applied this idea to the interrogation of Abu Zubaydah. According to Human Rights First, internal FBI memos and press reports have pointed to SERE training as the basis for some of the harshest techniques authorized for use on detainees by the Pentagon. In 2003, Jane Meyer, who reported for The New Yorker, also said, according to the SERE affiliate and two other sources familiar with the program, after September 11th, several psychologists versed in SERE techniques began advising interrogators at Guantanamo Bay and elsewhere. Some of these psychologists essentially tried to reverse engineer the SERE program, as the affiliate put it. They put good knowledge and used it in a bad way. Another of the sources said interrogators and the behavioral science consultation teams members at Guantanamo adopted coercive techniques similar to those employed in the SERE program. However, the Bush administration's February 2002 memorandum had, in fact, stated that only al-Qaeda detainees were not covered by the Geneva Conventions. That same order held that Taliban detainees would be entitled to treatment under Common Article 3 of the Geneva Conventions. However, like I said before, these memorandums were reversed. As of late, there are approximately 31 detainees at Guantanamo Bay. The trials have not started, and who knows when they will start. According to then U.S. President Donald Trump, he vowed to keep the prison open and use it to detain terrorists, potentially including American supporters of ISIS. On January 30, 2019, just before delivering his State of the Union address, Trump signed an executive order to keep the prison open indefinitely. On February 11, 2021, U.S. President Joe Biden announced a review of plans to close the camp by the end of his term. At the time, there were 40 prisoners at the camp, many of whom have been held for 2 decades without being charged or tried. I think we can all agree that the SERE program, the CIA, State Department, have all failed the American people for justice by using torture to coerce confessions from suspects that they didn't need to torture. And now these detainees, these 5 suspects involved with the September 11th attacks, could very well walk free because the confessions made under torture cannot be used in a court of law. The Central Intelligence Agency should be held accountable for this, as well as the Bush administration for allowing these inhumane practices to be administered, even to the dangerous suspects held at Guantanamo Bay.